Maya's hands trembled as she reached for her helmet seals, every instinct screaming that she was about to commit suicide. The atmosphere outside contained chemicals that would burn her lungs and skin, and the gravity would crush her bones without the suit's exoskeleton support. But resonance of growing crystals had offered to teach her to breathe their breath without harm. And if there was even a chance that was possible, she had to try. Wait, Resonance said, its massive form shifting closer. The transition requires preparation. Your people's bodies follow different patterns than ours. We must first teach your flesh to sing in harmony with our world's song. The Kitharan extended one of its appendages, which transformed as Maya watched. What had been solid crystal became flowing liquid, then reshaped itself into something that looked almost like a human hand. Though 3 times larger, and shot through with veins of flowing metal. This will feel strange to your senses, Resonance warned. We will share a small portion of our cultivation song with your body, teaching it to recognize patterns of harmony rather than patterns of destruction. Do not resist the changes you feel. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. The giant hand touched her helmet gently, and immediately she felt something impossible happening. Warmth spread through her suit's systems, but not the kind of warmth generated by heating elements or thermal regulators. This felt like warmth with intention, like energy that carried information along with temperature. Her suit's sensors went wild as readings that should have been impossible registered across all systems. The crushing gravity was still there, but somehow her bones weren't breaking under the strain. The toxic atmosphere still pressed against her helmet, but her lungs weren't burning, even though she could taste something like cinnamon and starlight in the recycled air. Your species possesses remarkable adaptability, Resonance observed, its voice now seeming to come from inside Maya's head as well as through her helmet speakers. Your flesh learns new songs quickly once it understands the melody. This is why you survive in places where others perish. Maya felt her body changing in ways she couldn't describe, not changing physically, exactly, but changing in how it related to the environment around it. The gravity was still crushing, but her muscles seemed to have found ways to work with it rather than against it. The atmospheric pressure still pressed against her, but her organs had somehow learned to maintain their shape despite forces that should have flattened them. How is this possible? Maya gasped, feeling more alive than she had since landing on the planet. All matter wishes to express itself in patterns of complexity and beauty, Resonance explained. Your body is made of matter, just as ours are. When we teach it to hear the songs that matter sings, it can learn to harmonize, rather than fighting against the world's natural rhythms. The largest of the assembled Kitharans spoke again, its harmonics now accessible to Maya in ways that bypassed her translator entirely. The small, warm thing learns quickly. Perhaps there is wisdom in studying how her people adapt to impossibility. If they can learn to cultivate rather than consume, they might indeed have knowledge worth sharing. Maya tried to process what was happening to her. According to everything she understood about biology and physics, what the Kitharans were doing should have been impossible. They seemed to be rewriting the fundamental parameters of how her body interacted with the environment, teaching her cells to function under conditions that should have been instantly fatal. The cultivation song is not magic, though it may seem so to those who have not learned to hear it, Resonance said, apparently sensing her confusion. Your people understand that matter and energy are different expressions of the same underlying reality. We have learned to work with that reality directly, teaching matter to express itself in patterns of our choosing. You're manipulating quantum fields, Maya realized, her scientific training finally catching up with her experience. Somehow you've learned to adjust the fundamental forces at a subatomic level, changing how particles interact with each other. Your words describe the surface of the truth. Resonance agreed. But understanding requires more than description. Experience the cultivation song directly, and your comprehension will deepen beyond what language can convey. Maya felt her helmet seals releasing, though she couldn't remember consciously operating them. The environmental suit that had kept her alive since landing on Kithara Prime opened like a flower, exposing her to an atmosphere that should have killed her within seconds. Instead, she found herself breathing air that tasted like morning rain and distant lightning, feeling more awake and alive than she had in years. The gravity was still there, still far beyond anything humans had evolved to handle, but her body moved through it like a swimmer in deep water. Every step required effort, but it was manageable effort, rather than the crushing struggle she had experienced in the suit. Her bones didn't break, her muscles didn't tear, and her organs continued to function despite pressures that should have flattened her. Impossible, Maya whispered, then laughed at the inadequacy of the word. Everything about this is impossible. Your people have a saying, the largest Kitharan observed. Sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. What you are experiencing is neither technology nor magic, but understanding applied to the fundamental patterns that create reality. Maya looked around the crystalline chamber with new eyes. Where before she had seen advanced but incomprehensible technology, she now perceived something far more profound. The Kitharans hadn't built their city. They had convinced the matter itself to take these forms. They hadn't generated energy. They had invited the universe's natural tendency toward complexity to express itself through their structures. Your people could learn these patterns, Resonance said, its massive form somehow seeming less overwhelming now that Maya could perceive the harmony underlying its existence. But learning requires more than intellectual understanding. It requires fundamental changes in how your species relates to the universe around you. What kind of changes? Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. You must learn to invite rather than command, to cultivate rather than exploit, to grow rather than consume. The largest Kitharan explained. These are not merely philosophical principles but practical requirements for working with the cultivation song. Matter responds to intention, and intentions based on force or greed create discord rather than harmony. Maya thought about human history, about the long pattern of technological advancement driven by competition, conflict, and the desire to dominate rather than cooperate. Could humanity really change its fundamental approach to the universe? Could a species that had spent millennia learning to impose its will on the environment learn instead to work in partnership with natural forces? Some of my people are ready for these changes, Maya said carefully. But others would see your knowledge as another tool to be used for gaining advantage over their enemies. How do you teach cultivation to those who only understand conquest? Perhaps you do not teach them, another Kitharan suggested. Perhaps you begin with those who are ready to learn, and let understanding grow naturally from there. Cultivation cannot be forced upon unwilling soil, but that would mean leaving part of humanity behind, Maya protested. My entire species would be divided between those who understand cultivation and those who remain trapped in patterns of exploitation. Is this not already the case? Resonance asked gently. Do not all species contain both the seeds of harmony and the seeds of discord? The cultivation song simply allows the harmonious seeds to flourish, while the discordant ones wither from lack of support. Maya felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. She had come to Kithara Prime hoping to bring back technology that would benefit all of humanity. Instead, she had discovered knowledge that could only be shared with those willing to fundamentally change their approach to existence. It was more profound than anything she had imagined, but also more challenging than any simple technological exchange. If I return to my people with this knowledge, Maya said slowly, I'll be asking them to choose between who they have been and who they could become. Some will see that as an opportunity for growth. Others will see it as an attack on everything they believe about human nature. All growth requires the willingness to release old patterns in favor of new ones, the largest Kitharan observed. This is true whether the growth is individual or collective. Your people have demonstrated remarkable adaptability in extreme circumstances. Perhaps they can adapt to the most extreme circumstance of all, the possibility of true harmony with the universe. Maya closed her eyes and tried to imagine explaining what she had learned to the Galactic Council. How could she describe the sensation of breathing toxic air without harm? How could she convince anyone that the Kitharans had learned to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics through something that sounded like mystical nonsense but produced results that surpassed humanity's greatest technological achievements? There's something else, Maya said, opening her eyes. Even if my people are willing to learn cultivation, how would they survive the learning process? I can only exist in your environment because you've temporarily modified how my body interacts with the world around it. Without that modification, Any human who came here would die within minutes. Cultivation begins where the student stands, Resonance explained. Your people need not come to our world to learn our songs. We can teach them to hear the harmony that exists within their own environment, their own bodies, their own technologies. Once they understand the principles, they can apply them to any circumstance. You would send teachers to Earth? Maya asked, surprised. We would send knowledge in forms your people can understand, the largest Kytheran corrected. Teachers, yes, but also seeds of understanding that can grow within your existing frameworks. The cultivation song is not dependent on any particular species or environment. It is the underlying harmony that allows complexity to emerge from simplicity. Maya felt a spark of hope. If the Kytharans were willing to share their knowledge in ways that humans could access safely, then the devastating choice she had been dreading might not be necessary. Humanity could learn cultivation gradually, integrating it with their existing understanding, rather than abandoning everything they had built. What would you need from us in return? Maya asked. Perspective, Resonance said immediately. Your species' experience with survival in impossible conditions represents knowledge that even we value. You have learned to endure where others would despair, to adapt where others would break, to find hope where others would surrender. These are forms of cultivation that our people have never needed to develop. Additionally, another Kytheran added, your people's tendency to preserve knowledge across generations could be valuable for maintaining the cultivation songs in environments where they might otherwise fade. We have always existed in harmony with our world, but you have experience with maintaining harmony despite chaos. Maya laughed, recognizing the irony. You want to learn from us how to survive in circumstances where cultivation becomes difficult or impossible? Precisely. The universe is vast and full of challenges. There may come circumstances where even our understanding of harmony faces disruption. Your people's stubborn refusal to accept defeat could prove valuable for maintaining cultivation under impossible conditions. The conversation continued for hours, though Maya lost track of time in the euphoria of breathing freely in an environment that should have killed her. The Kytharans explained their understanding of quantum field manipulation, while Maya shared human insights into adaptation and survival. Gradually, the outline of a real partnership began to emerge. The Kytharans would share their cultivation techniques with carefully selected humans, who demonstrated genuine commitment to harmony over exploitation. In exchange, human teachers would work with young Kytharans to develop new applications of cultivation principles for extreme environments. Both species would benefit from perspectives they could never have developed alone. There is one final consideration, the largest Kytharan said as their discussion wound toward conclusion. The knowledge we share carries with it great responsibility. Cultivation techniques applied with destructive intent can cause damage beyond anything your species has yet imagined. How do we ensure that such knowledge is used wisely? Maya thought about the question carefully. On Earth, we have traditions of mentorship and gradual advancement. For dangerous knowledge, students prove their understanding and responsibility before being taught more advanced techniques. Perhaps something similar could work here. A wise suggestion. We propose that any humans who wish to learn cultivation must first spend time among our people, demonstrating their commitment to harmony through their actions rather than their words. Only those who show genuine understanding would be trusted with the deeper songs. And any Kytharans who wish to learn human survival techniques would spend time on human worlds, learning to maintain harmony despite chaos and scarcity, Maya added. The agreement was more complex and far-reaching than anything Maya had imagined when she first stepped out of her crash pod. It wasn't just a technology transfer but the beginning of true cultural exchange between species with fundamentally different approaches to existence. The implications would reshape both civilizations over generations. As the formal discussion concluded, Maya realized that her environmental suit's life support had been completely exhausted for hours. She was surviving in an impossible environment through techniques that her own species didn't yet understand. Kept alive by the goodwill of beings who could have easily dismissed her as irrelevant. When do we begin? Maya asked, looking around at the assembled Kytharans. We have already begun, Resonance replied, its harmonics carrying notes of what Maya now recognized as amusement. Your survival here is the first lesson. Your willingness to risk dissolution for the sake of understanding is the second. Your ability to perceive harmony despite your species' focus on conflict is the third. Maya felt tears streaming down her face, though whether they were from joy or overwhelming relief, she couldn't say. She had come to Kythera Prime expecting to negotiate for technology that would give humanity an advantage in galactic civilization. Instead, she had discovered the possibility of transformation that could elevate her entire species beyond the limitations that had defined them since they first learned to use tools. The Council of Harmonies has decided, the largest Kytheron announced formally. We will open the paths of cultivation to those humans who prove ready to walk them. In exchange, we ask for instruction in the paths of endurance that have allowed your people to thrive in impossible places. Let this be the beginning of true harmony between our kinds. Maya closed her eyes and listened to the cultivation song that now flowed through her body, teaching her cells to thrive in an environment that should have been instantly fatal. In a few hours, a rescue ship would arrive to extract her from what the Galactic Council assumed would be a failed mission. Instead, she would return with the foundation for a partnership that could reshape the future of both species. The small human girl who had been sent to die on a planet of giants was going home with the keys to unlocking humanity's true potential. It had been, Maya reflected, one hell of a successful first contact. As she prepared for the journey back to her crashed pod, Maya realized that she was no longer the same person who had landed on Kythera Prime 3 days ago. The cultivation song had changed her in ways that went beyond simple physical adaptation. She understood now that survival wasn't just about enduring impossible conditions, but about finding harmony within them. That understanding would make all the difference in the challenges to come, both for her and for the species she represented in the vast tapestry of galactic civilization. Maya's first step outside the pod nearly sent her sprawling face first into the alien soil. The gravity hit her like a physical weight, making her bones feel like they were made of lead, and her muscles like overstretched rubber bands. She caught herself against the pod's hull, gasping inside her helmet as her body tried to adjust to forces that should have crushed her flat. The suit's exoskeleton whirred to life, servos and support struts activating to help distribute the crushing weight. It wasn't comfortable, but it was survivable. And right now, survivable was all Maya needed. She stood slowly, testing her balance and trying to get a feel for how to move in this impossible environment. The clearing stretched for roughly 50 meters in every direction, surrounded by the crystal trees she had glimpsed from inside the pod. Up close, they were even more magnificent. Each trunk was perfectly transparent, shot through with veins of what looked like flowing metal that pulsed with soft light. The branches overhead created a canopy that filtered the sunlight into patterns that shifted and danced as the breeze moved the leaves. Maya activated her suit's recording systems and began documenting everything. The Council would want detailed reports on the planet's ecosystem, assuming she lived long enough to transmit them. Her first priority, however, was finding the Kytherans. According to her navigation system, the nearest population center was approximately 12 kilometers to the northeast, which might as well have been on another planet given how difficult movement was in this gravity. She had made it perhaps 20 meters from the pod when she heard the sound. It was low and rhythmic, like someone beating a massive drum in the distance. The vibrations traveled through the ground, making her teeth rattle inside her helmet. Maya froze, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was in this alien environment. The drumming grew closer, accompanied by a sound like wind moving through a cave system. Maya looked around frantically for cover, but the clearing offered nothing but the geometric plants and her crashed pod. She was completely exposed, a tiny figure in a landscape designed for beings 10 times her size. The source of the noise emerged from the crystal forest with a grace that defied its enormous size. Maya's first thought was that someone had taught a mountain to walk. The creature stood at least 20 meters tall, with a body that seemed to be part organic and part living architecture. Its skin was the same translucent material as the trees, shot through with the same flowing metal veins. Multiple limbs moved in perfect coordination, each one ending in appendages that could have crushed her pod without effort. This had to be a Kytheron. Maya activated her universal translator, and tried to remember every piece of first contact protocol she had ever learned. The creature's massive head turned in her direction, and she found herself looking up into eyes that were each larger than her entire body. The Keitharan made a sound that her translator couldn't process, a complex harmony of tones that seemed to come from multiple sources within its body. It approached slowly, each footstep sending tremors through the ground that nearly knocked Maya off her feet. When it was close enough that she had to crane her neck to see its face, it stopped and made the sound again. Maya's translator finally caught on, producing words in her helmet speakers that sounded strange and formal. Small, warm thing that moves with purpose. From where do you fall? What manner of creature makes sounds in the deep language? The deep language presumably referred to the radio frequencies her translator was using. Maya cleared her throat and spoke as clearly as she could manage. My name is Maya Chen. I come from the stars as a representative of the Galactic Council. I seek an audience with your people to discuss matters of mutual benefit. The Keitharan tilted its enormous head, studying her with an intensity that made Maya feel like a microbe under a microscope. When it spoke again, its voice carried notes that sounded almost amused. You speak the star tongue, yet you are too small to be a star singer. Your warmth is wrong. Your movement patterns unfamiliar. Are you perhaps a lost child of the deep dwellers? I am human, Maya said, trying to project confidence despite feeling like she was addressing a living skyscraper. My species comes from a world far from here. We have traveled across the galaxy to meet your people and learn from your wisdom. Human, the Keitharan repeated, as if testing the word. This designation is unknown. You say you come from the stars, yet you fall from the sky in a burning shell, like the seed pods of the great trees. Do your people grow from pods as well? Maya realized that trying to explain spaceflight to a civilization that might not have discovered it yet would take more time than she had. Instead, she decided to focus on establishing basic communication and trust. My people travel between the stars using devices that allow us to cross vast distances. I have come to your world because we have detected that your people possess knowledge that could benefit many species across the galaxy. The Keitharan was quiet for a long moment, its metallic veins pulsing with patterns of light that might have been its equivalent of thought. When it spoke again, its tone had changed subtly. You speak of knowledge as if it were a thing to be taken and carried away. Knowledge lives in the harmony between thought and growth, between intention and cultivation. It cannot be removed from its proper place any more than the song can be removed from the singer. That was definitely a philosophical perspective Maya hadn't been prepared for. The briefings had suggested the Keitharans might be a highly advanced technological civilization, but their representative seemed to speak more like a poet or mystic than a scientist. She decided to try a different approach. Perhaps I have misunderstood, Maya said carefully. We have observed that your cities generate enormous amounts of energy without damaging your environment. This suggests a harmony between technology and nature that my people have not achieved. We hope to learn how such harmony might be possible. The Keitharan's eyes brightened, literally, with light that pulsed in complex patterns. Ah, now you speak of true matters. The harmony between making and growing, between shaping and being shaped. This is indeed the great work of our people, though it is not work as you might understand it. Could you help me understand it better? Understanding requires more than words. Small, warm thing. It requires participation in the great cultivation. But first, you must survive long enough to learn. Your shell, the Keitharan gestured toward Maya's environmental suit, protects you from the breath of our world. But it also separates you from the cultivation. How long can you remain within your shell? Maya checked her suit's life support readout. Approximately 60 hours at current consumption rates. Such a brief span. The Keitharan's voice carried what sounded like sympathy. Yet, perhaps sufficient for a beginning. I am called resonance of growing crystals, though that is the approximation your sound-making can produce. I will guide you to the place of first understanding, where others of my people gather to tend the young growth. The journey to the place of first understanding was unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. Resonance of growing crystals moved through the crystal forest with a fluidity that seemed impossible for something so massive. The creature's feet found purchase on what looked like solid ground, but Maya's instruments detected complex root systems and crystalline structures just beneath the surface that created a living network throughout the forest. More remarkable still was how the forest responded to the Kitharan's presence. Trees that blocked the path somehow shifted aside without any visible mechanism, their crystalline trunks bending like grass in the wind. Smaller plants reconfigured themselves to create clearer roots, and the very ground seemed to reshape itself to provide easier passage. "Your forest is alive," Maya observed, struggling to keep up despite the assistance her exoskeleton provided. "Not just the plants, but the entire ecosystem functions as a single organism. All places where my people dwell become places of cultivation," Resonance replied, its massive form moving ahead without apparent effort. "We do not build upon the world," small Maya Chen. "We grow with it, teaching it new patterns of existence, while learning from the patterns it teaches us." They emerged from the forest onto a ridge that overlooked a valley filled with structures that defied every assumption Maya had made about architecture. The buildings seemed to grow from the landscape itself, their crystalline walls flowing seamlessly from the bedrock, spires twisted upward like frozen tornadoes, connected by bridges that pulsed with the same metallic veins she had seen in the trees. Energy flowed visibly through the structures, creating patterns of light that were beautiful beyond description. "The place of first understanding," Resonance announced. "Here, young Kitharans learn to hear the deep songs of matter and energy. Perhaps you too can learn to hear, despite your different nature." Maya stared at the city in wonder. This wasn't just advanced technology. It was a completely different approach to the relationship between civilization and environment. Where human cities imposed order on their surroundings, this place seemed to have negotiated a partnership with the very atoms it was built from. "How is this possible?" she whispered, her translator picking up the words and broadcasting them to Resonance. "All matter sings, small Maya Chen. Your people have perhaps learned to force matter to take shapes that serve your needs. But have you learned to hear its preferences? To understand what forms it desires to take? We have spent countless generations learning to listen, to suggest rather than command, to cultivate rather than construct." They descended into the valley along paths that formed themselves as they walked. Maya's instruments went wild, trying to analyze what they were detecting. The ground beneath her feet registered as both solid rock and flowing liquid, somehow maintaining the properties of both simultaneously. The structures around them generated massive amounts of energy, but her sensors couldn't identify any conventional power source. Other Kitharans moved through the city with the same fluid grace as Resonance, each one a unique variation on the same impossible theme. Some were taller and more angular, their crystalline skin refracting light in sharp geometric patterns. Others were broader and more rounded, their bodies flowing like living water. All of them possessed the same metallic veins that pulsed with inner light, and all of them moved with the casual power of beings who had mastered forces Maya's people couldn't even properly detect. "Your energy systems," Maya said as they approached what appeared to be the center of the city. "Our instruments suggest you're generating power equivalent to a small star, but we can't identify any fusion reactors or antimatter containment systems. What's your power source?" "Power is not taken, small Maya Chen. It is invited to flow in patterns of usefulness. The universe wishes to express itself through complexity and organization. We have simply learned to provide pathways for that expression." Maya's scientific training rebelled against such mystical language, but her instruments couldn't argue with the results. Whatever the Kitharans were doing, it worked on a scale that put human technology to shame. The trick was figuring out whether their methods could be adapted for use by species that hadn't spent countless generations learning to hear the songs of matter. They stopped before a structure that seemed to be part building and part enormous flower. Petals of crystalline material opened as they approached, revealing an interior space that somehow felt both vast and intimate. Other Kitharans were gathered inside, their forms creating a living mandala of light and energy. "The Council of Harmonies," Resonance explained. "They will determine whether your people are ready to learn the deeper songs." Maya straightened her shoulders and checked her translator one final time. This was why she had come to Kithara Prime. Everything up to this point had been preparation for the real challenge. convincing a civilization of giants that humanity deserved to learn their secrets. The largest of the assembled Kytharans spoke first, its voice creating harmonies that Maya felt as much as heard. Small, warm thing from the star paths, you seek knowledge that your people are not ready to hold. Your species takes rather than cultivates, forces rather than invites, consumes rather than grows. Why should we share wisdom that you will use to repeat these patterns on a larger scale? The question hit Maya like a physical blow. She had expected to negotiate for technology or information, but instead found herself defending humanity's right to exist. Worse, she wasn't sure the Kytharan was wrong. Human history was full of examples of advanced technology being used for destruction rather than creation. You're right, Maya said finally, surprising herself with her honesty. My people have often used new knowledge destructively. We've fought wars with every new technology we've developed, and we've damaged our own world through careless use of industrial processes. But we've also learned from our mistakes. We've begun to understand that true advancement requires harmony between progress and preservation. Words are easy to speak, another Kytharan interjected. The deep songs reveal intention more clearly than language. If your people truly seek harmony, why do they send warriors to negotiate with gardeners? Maya felt a moment of confusion before realizing what the Kytharan meant. Her suit's exoskeleton and life support systems registered to their senses as armor and weapons. To beings who had learned to work with their environment rather than against it, she must look like a walking declaration of hostility. I am not a warrior, Maya said, though she realized how unconvincing that must sound. I am an explorer and scientist. My equipment is designed to help me survive in environments that would otherwise kill me, not to harm others. Yet you carry within your shell devices designed to sample and analyze without invitation, the largest Kytharan observed. You seek to take small pieces of our world back to your people, as if knowledge could be harvested like fruit from a tree. Maya felt the conversation slipping away from her. Every response she could think of seemed to confirm their suspicions about humanity's exploitative nature. She was running out of time, both in the conversation and in her mission. Her suit's life support had already consumed more power than expected due to the strain of operating in high gravity. Then an idea occurred to her, inspired by something Resonance had said earlier. If the Kytharans truly believed in cultivation rather than exploitation, perhaps she needed to offer something in return, rather than simply asking for knowledge. You're right, Maya said again. I have been thinking like someone who wants to take your wisdom back to my people. But what if instead, some of my people came here to learn your ways? What if we offered to share our own knowledge in exchange for the chance to participate in your cultivation? The assembled Kytharans went quiet, their metallic veins pulsing in synchronized patterns. Maya held her breath, waiting to see if her desperate gambit had any chance of success. An interesting proposal, the largest Kytharan said eventually. But your people's knowledge follows different patterns than ours. What could beings who think in terms of taking and forcing offer to those who practice growing and inviting? Maya thought about human achievements, trying to find something that might appeal to beings who valued harmony over power. My people are very good at surviving in impossible conditions, she said finally. We've learned to live in environments where we don't belong, to find solutions when conventional approaches fail, and we're excellent at preserving knowledge across generations, even when the original contexts are lost. Survival and preservation, Resonance mused. These are indeed valuable skills, but they speak more of endurance than cultivation. Perhaps, Maya admitted. But sometimes endurance is what allows cultivation to continue when everything seems lost. My people have experience with rebuilding after catastrophe, with maintaining hope when rational analysis suggests despair. These might be useful skills for any civilization that grows across the stars. The Kytharans exchanged more harmonic communications that Maya's translator couldn't fully parse. She waited, trying not to think about how much time she had left before her life support failed. The weight of gravity pressed down on her like a constant reminder that she was fundamentally out of place in this environment. Finally, the largest Kytharan spoke again. We will consider your proposal, small Maya Chen. But consideration requires time, and you have little time remaining in your shell. We offer you a choice. Return to your star paths now, and carry our words to your people. Or remain, and risk the dissolution of your shell, to experience the first lessons of cultivation. Maya looked at her life support readout. Even if she left immediately, the return journey to the pod would consume most of her remaining power. But if she stayed to learn what the Ketherans might teach her, she would definitely run out of life support long before she could return to safety. It wasn't really a choice at all. Maya had come to Kithara Prime to make first contact and learn about Kitharan technology. She couldn't accomplish either goal by retreating to her pod and waiting for rescue. If she was going to fail, at least she could fail while trying to succeed. I choose to remain and learn, Maya said, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. If this is my last conversation, I'd rather spend it discovering something new than hiding in my shell. The Ketharan's light patterns shifted to something that might have been approval or might have been amusement. Resonance moved closer, its massive form somehow managing not to seem threatening despite its size. Then we begin with the first lesson, Resonance said. To cultivate harmony with matter, one must first understand that the boundary between self and environment is an illusion. Your shell protects you from our world, but it also prevents you from learning to harmonize with it. Are you willing to trust that we can teach you to breathe our breath without harm? Maya looked down at her environmental suit, the only thing keeping her alive in this impossible place. Everything about her training screamed that removing the suit would be suicide. The atmosphere was toxic, the gravity crushing, the very air filled with particles that could dissolve her flesh. But she had come to Kithara Prime to learn things that no human had ever learned before. If that required taking risks that no human had ever taken, then so be it. Tell me what I need to do, Maya said, reaching for the seals of her helmet.